It's time for your valuable home.
Ron, as we wrap up the 5-part series, Coolest Neighborhoods in America with Buffalo, what goes into a podcast, let alone this series? It's a lot of time. It's a lot of research for both info for the podcast and the YouTube video. People ask me about the information about the coolest neighborhoods in America, and I just say, Ron, the research, the time, the knowledge, the determination to do this that Ron put into this. So, Ron, kudos to you to make it perfect for our listeners to have it and see a great show. So
I appreciate you saying that. I really do.
Yeah,
It's been a labor of love. It really has. It's just, you got to love it or you wouldn't be doing it.
That is true. Yeah,
Okay.
that is true. So let's get on with the featured segment here and continue with the coolest neighborhoods in America.
I'll tell you, we are about to embark on what I consider a fascinating journey to legendary Frank Lloyd Wright's residential and other architectural creations in Buffalo, New York, on the shores of Lake Erie. Buffalo is basically right on the border with Canada. According to AD, or Architectural Digest, around the turn of the 20th century, Buffalo was the country's 8th most populated city. In 1901, Buffalo had more millionaires per capita than any other city in America. And the rest, as they say, is history, including architectural history at its very, very best. So we're fortunate today to have Jesse Fisher, the newly appointed director of the Frank Lloyd Wright created Martin House, here to guide us on the journey, the 5th and final in our podcast and YouTube video series, The Coolest Neighborhoods in America. Jesse, first of all, congratulations on your new appointment.
Thank you so much. It's really exciting to be here.
Yeah, well, it's exciting to have you here, too. Jesse, can you give us an overview of some of the neighborhoods in Buffalo that serve as a showcase for Frank Lloyd Wright's prairie genre of architecture?
Like so much of the city of Buffalo itself, these neighborhoods were shaped by the vision of Frederick Law Olmsted, who's the famed landscape designer.
Yep.
In the late 1860s, Olmsted was originally brought to Buffalo to build one park, but he ended up designing an entire park system, the first one he designed in the country, what he referred to as a city within a park. Two of Wright's homes here in Buffalo, the Martin House and the Davidson House, are located within blocks of Olmsted's Delaware Park, which is the crowning jewel of the park system, the one he was originally brought here to build, on streets that are shaped by the curving expanse of its green space. And the Wright-designed Heath House is on Soldier Circle, which is one of a series of landscape circles Olmsted used to connect his system of parkways, which were meant to run between each of the parks that he designed, sort of a green necklace that ran throughout the whole city, and several of Wright's properties are located right on those parks and parkways.
Olmsted did all that designing in Buffalo before he did Central Park in New York?
No, Central Park is widely considered his first park, but the parkway system that he designed here in Buffalo, which he would subsequently go on to do in many cities, Seattle, other places, he really moved away from just building one park and went to this sort of system of parkways. And the first time he did that was here in Buffalo. Buffalo is a beautiful city, and it has all of these really diverse and interesting and exciting neighborhoods. So, yeah, folks haven't been to Buffalo, I definitely encourage them to come and visit. These neighborhoods that we're talking about, the ones that Wright would have been designing in at the turn of the last century, are known for their tree-lined streets and their landscape front lawns. And at the time that Wright first came to Buffalo, these neighborhoods would have been made up primarily of Victorian and Queen Anne style homes, most of which you can still see today. It's a very well-preserved city. And I think Wright's experimental prairie style houses would have been quite a dramatic and unusual departure from their neighbors.
What are the defining characteristics of Wright's prairie architecture, which he invented, right?
He did, absolutely. He pioneered this style, and then it goes on to be called the Prairie School because there were others who studied under Wright and, became quite a popular style for a long time. It really celebrates kind of the long, low landscape of the Midwest, which is where Wright grew up and where he really developed his craft. The style has strong horizontality to it. It sort of prefers to spread out over its site rather than kind of build up. He often included low-pitched roofs, large central chimneys, and cantilevered eaves. Prairie-style design and detailing is often seen as incorporating the natural world, and Wright really liked to blur the lines between the interior and the exterior spaces. You can really see that when you're here at the Martin House. In some cases, he would even be involved in actually planning the landscape around the home to make sure you had that sense of sort of the interior and the exterior as one space. And this was especially true at the Martin House, where he was really given a lot of freedom in this design, and the landscape is also a Wright design. And 3 years ago, we actually finished restoring the original garden plan at the Martin House. If you've been to the Martin House but you haven't been here recently, it's really worth to come and see in the blooming season between May and October, and you really get a sense of what he designed for the exterior of this site, not just the house itself.
The ones that really succeed, and you can go through the years with the artists of in Europe, the Impressionist movement, have a benefactor, a godfather, a patron that pushes them along. So what brought Frank Lloyd Wright from his Midwest roots to Buffalo, New York?
It was exactly that. It was one man. It was Darwin D. Martin, who was here in Buffalo. And at that point, he was senior executive at a company here in Buffalo called the Larkin Soap Factory, which was a really groundbreaking Buffalo business. It kind of revolutionized, thanks in large part to Mr. Martin, the mail order business in the United States. So this was a really rapidly growing business. They had a lot of factories, and their administrative offices were kind of spread out all over. So John Larkin, who's the owner, wanted to build a new headquarters building that would be worthy of his growing company, and he tasked Darwin Martin with finding that architect. Now, Mr. Larkin originally suggested Louis Sullivan for the job, probably because his Prudential building, which is widely considered the first modern American skyscraper, was built here in Buffalo in 1896. So Mr. Larkin would have been, familiar with this very cool building that had just gone up in Buffalo. But Darwin Martin's brother, William Martin, lived in Oak Park, Illinois, right near Frank Lloyd Wright. And he suggested that Darwin Martin come out and meet Frank Lloyd Wright, and he did. And the rest, as they say, really is history. The two hit it off immediately. Darwin Martin really saw Frank Lloyd Wright as a groundbreaking artist, so he was really interested in bringing him to Buffalo. And at the same time, he was also interested in building his own family estate. So before they dove into that bigger commercial project, which would be Frank Lloyd Wright's first major commercial project on his own, Darwin Martin asked him to start building his family estate. So he first commissioned Wright to build a home for his sister and her husband, and then subsequently his own home. And those projects were so well received that he did go on to win the commission for the Larkin Administration Building, which started in 1904, and it would be his first commercial commission and also one of his first commissions going towards the East Coast, not just staying, in the Chicago, Wisconsin area.
And this house is spectacular, Kevin. It's 15,000 square feet, and it's a house and then some. Jesse, can you describe the residence and the then some?
The Martin House itself is a 3-story family house, and essentially, Darwin Martin really became a patron of Frank Lloyd Wright, as you say, Frank Lloyd Wright, the artist. Frank Lloyd Wright ended up with almost really unlimited funds and a very free hand in the design, and he really got to explore those architectural principles and those design elements that really would go on to be so key to creating that whole prairie style. So extending from the main house is a pergola, which is an open-air walkway, and it connects the home to the stunning conservatory, which features a full-size replica of the winged Victory of Sam McRae statue. The conservatory was actually the Wrights, who are very interested in their garden and in gardening, had asked for a greenhouse. And rather than build a simple greenhouse, of course, Frank Lloyd Wright built them this beautiful conservatory. And then he also designed a carriage house, which is also interconnected to the whole system. And it was one of the first in the area. It was specifically designed to house horses, but also automobiles were kept in the same building. All 3 of these connecting structures were demolished in the 1960s, but have subsequently been meticulously reconstructed as part of the ongoing restoration efforts. Then the estate also includes 2 other Wright-designed houses. The Barton House, which was the first Wright-designed building built in Buffalo, which is the house that Darwin Martin commissioned for his sister and his brother-in-law. And then gardening was so important to the Martins that they also had Wright design a gardener's cottage, which is located on the western side of the estate. So that was added in 1909 and really does highlight the importance of the landscape to the Martins. And taken all together, Wright actually referred to this collection of 6 buildings as a domestic symphony, and we agree. And then in addition to the Wright-designed buildings on the estate, there's a rather spectacular visitor center that was built a few years ago. It's called the Great Batch Pavilion, and it was designed by Toshiko Mori, who's a really renowned contemporary architect. There's a beautiful Victorian home on the estate that we use as our administrative offices. And then there's a carriage house that used to be on a neighboring property that now serves as a cafe for the property. So all in all, the whole estate encompasses about 1.5 acres, and there's a lot to see and do while you're here.
Yeah, imagine that, Kev. I mean, he's a contractor. He works on houses all the time. He's got a 15,000 square foot house and then some on 1.5 acres. I mean, that's really a feat.
Yeah, definitely a lot. I always like the windows in this house, the way they're really designed. It's just a lot of detail into the windows.
Didn't he also design the furnishings for Martin House? Wasn't that a thing with him, designing furnishings too, the complete package?
Yes. He designed nearly all of the furniture and also fixtures and things in this house. And what he didn't design, he chose, from the light fixtures to the very first barrel chair ever designed to the dining room table. He even chose the art on the walls. He chose them from a collection of Japanese prints that he had acquired while traveling abroad. And then, as you just mentioned, the house is home to an astonishing collection of art glass. So in just the Martin House alone, there are 9 unique patterns of art glass, which is more than he created for any other residential project in his career. And then each of the other spaces that we just talked about, the pergola, the carriage house, the gardener's cottage, the Barton house, they also have their own unique patterns of art glass. So literally you can stand in any space in this estate and see a different view, a different angle, all through these windows, which are all designed to be completely unique to the space that they're in. So all in all, the estate has over 450 pieces of art glass in it. And like I said, these are comprised of many, many different designs and patterns. It's really worth seeing.
Aren't some of the original furnishings still there?
Yeah, we actually have quite a bit of it. So originally, Wright designed about 55 pieces of furniture as part of the commission. And today in our collection, what we have on view, which we use sort of period of significance of right around 1907. And so what we have that's generally on view to the public is 35 pieces of original Frank Lloyd Wright designed pieces for the Martin House. We have another 24 of the original prints that were selected by Wright for the Martins. We have 76 original, replica, and reproduction Martin House furnishings. So that can include some of the decorative objects that are in the house, prints. It actually doesn't include the art glass or his encyclopedia volumes. Darwin Martin was an avid reader, and Frank Lloyd Wright created any number of bookcases and other things for him to store his really important collection of books. And then beyond the Wright-designed pieces, we also have hundreds of objects in the collection, which includes furniture, built-in cabinetry, the art glass, additional works of art that were designed by Frank Lloyd Wright for the Martins, and then the family's own personal belongings. It's a pretty stunning collection.
The whole thing is like a museum. Everything about it is worth seeing. Can you describe in more detail the neighborhood where the Martin House is then and now?
The neighborhood probably looks very similar now to when it did when Wright was designing this house. The neighborhood itself is listed on the National Register, and it is a really well-preserved neighborhood here in Buffalo. It sits right by the Olmsted-designed Delaware Park, and because of that, all the streets are sort of curved in this beautiful way. So you have these really lush lawns and beautiful street trees, and then a lot of Victorian, Queen Anne, and arts and crafts style homes. And then because we're located so close to the park, just down the street in Delaware Park is the Buffalo Zoo, and then the park connects this Parkside neighborhood to some of Buffalo's other major cultural attractions, Buffalo AKG Museum, the Buffalo History Museum, and the Richardson Olmsted Complex on the other side of the park, which is an old state psychiatric hospital that was actually designed by H.H. Richardson and is currently in the process of being adapted as a hotel, apartments, and other contemporary uses. So if you love historic architecture and you love beautiful neighborhoods, you definitely want to put Buffalo on your list of places to visit.
Yeah, it's something I never realized before, because I'm a fan of Frank Lloyd Wright. Have you been to Falling Waters, Jesse?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Kevin, when you come upon a Frank Lloyd Wright designed building, it just takes your breath away. It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, Falling Waters does that. When I saw these photographs here, because I never knew this much about Buffalo and Frank Lloyd Wright, it takes your breath away. It's unbelievable. It should be an honor for you just to be the custodian of this whole thing, this piece of history.
Yeah, we really think of ourselves here as stewards. So this is something that belongs to everyone and hopefully for all time. So yeah, I do feel very honored to be here. And I know the whole staff and the whole team does. You know, one of my favorite things about the site is that there's no fence around it. So the neighborhood uses it almost as a pocket park. Just looking out my window right now, there's people walking their dogs past, and people use the space, and it really is a part of the community, and we just really want to make sure that everybody feels welcomed here.
After Wright created Martin House, that was in 1904, he designed other residences in a prairie style in 05 and 08 for two of Darwin Martin's fellow executives in the Larkin Company, right?
Yes.
Those structures have survived as well, haven't they, or have they?
Yeah, they have. The Heath House, which is on Soldier Circle, which is in the Elmwood Village neighborhood in the city of Buffalo, and the house on Tillinghast Place, which is just the Walter Davidson House, which is just a few blocks from the Martin House, not too far away at all, and also close to Delaware Park. And both have survived. Both are private residences, so you can't, take tours of them, but they've been very well cared for over the years, and they're both local landmarks, so, they should survive into the future without any, major alterations or demolitions or anything like that.
After Darwin Martin and his wife passed, Martin House was largely abandoned and partially demolished, and it stayed in limbo until 1992. What happened then?
So after Darwin Martin's death in 1935, the family was just really unable to maintain the property, and they really abandoned it fully in 1937. Mrs. Martin was able to sell the Martin House and the gardener's cottage to private owners before walking away from the estate. So those two structures were pretty well cared for. But for 17 years, the main Martin House stood vacant. It suffered just extensive damage from vandalism and weather. And then in 1954, a private individual purchased it from the city and for use as his home and architecture studio, in essence saving it from further neglect and even possible demolition, although he did have to make some changes to put his studio in and stuff. And in 1960, he was forced to sell the pergola, the conservatory, and the carriage house to raise funds save the main house, and those structures were subsequently demolished to make way for an apartment building. And then in 1967, the University of Buffalo purchased the Martin House as a residence for their incoming president, who was Martin Meyerson, who was a distinguished city planner, so they thought that was appropriate. And they hired Wright apprentice Edward Taffel to renovate and convert it back into a single-family residence. And then after Meyerson left in 1971, UB used it for meeting and entertainment space for the foundation, university archives, all kinds of different things. And then in 1975, the building, thanks to some local activists and some other folks who really understood how important it was, got it listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And then in 1986, they got it declared a National Historic Landmark, which, as you know, is the highest designation in America.
Oh, yes.
So that really helped people start to really pay attention and sort of coalesce around the house. So then, as you say, in 1992, the Martin House Restoration Corporation was legally created, and it was a really unique public-private partnership. It created the nonprofit organization, which is where I work, and we do the day-to-day care for the building and grounds. We run the education programs. We, make sure that the site is accessible to the public. But the University of Buffalo, which in 1992 still owned it, agreed to donate the house to the corporation and provide technical assistance and also funding assistance. And then New York State stepped to the plate as well through their Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. And they have provided really significant funding. They provide to us even today ongoing capital support and technical assistance, especially with the collection. And so it really is this very unique public-private partnership that we've been able to put together here, which I think is one of the reasons the restoration is as sort of meticulous and technically extraordinary as it is. The Martin House Restoration Corporation sort of started with a very simple mission, just raise the money to restore the main house and operate it as a historic house museum. But over time, it expanded to include the rebuilding of the lost pergola, conservatory, and carriage house. We've acquired the privately owned Barton House and Gardener's Cottage. Finally, we built the new visitor center, the Great Batch Pavilion, which was designed by Toshiko Mori, who's just an incredibly important architect in her own right. And that's allowed us to really provide greater interpretation and guest services opportunities for those visiting the site. So it's a really great space to come and visit.
How much money has been raised to restore Martin House and the grounds?
About $58 million has been invested in restoring the complete estate.
I must say, you guys have done a wonderful job. The Martin House was one of two residences Frank Lloyd Wright created for the Martin family. Two residences. The other, Graycliff, which isn't that far away, right?
No, it's about a 20-minute drive.
20-minute drive.
Beautiful on the shores of Lake Erie, yep.
It was their summer residence, built between 1926 and 31, is still situated on a cliff high atop the shores of Lake Erie. Like Martin House, wasn't Graycliff also restored thanks to groundswells of support and money?
Yes. Well, you always need that second factor, don't you?
Oh, you need it.
Yes, Graycliff had also become privately owned, and thanks to, again, that groundswell of public support of people really understanding the importance of this space, is also now, for all intents and purposes, fully restored. They've been working on that for about 20 years, and it's also a really beautiful project.
There are two websites, Graycliff, and you're associated with Graycliff, although Martin House and Graycliff aren't one and the same, right?
Right, two different organizations run the visitor experience, but we do work together quite a bit. And in the summer, you'll see we do some tours that encompass both sites. It's a great way, and those opportunities will come up on both of our websites as it gets closer to the summer season. But it's a great way to see one family, one architect, two houses, and it's a really great way to see both those spaces together.
Absolutely. I mean, that makes for a great trip to Buffalo. Can you describe Graycliff today and how much funding has been raised for the restoration of the house?
today, as we said, it is fully restored, the house, and it's open to the public year-round. So you don't just have to come in the summer. It's actually really beautiful to see the lake in the winter, too, and it is open year-round. And there's a guided tour program there as well. And the total investment in Graycliff has been about $10 million since the Graycliff Conservancy was formed and acquired the property in the late 1990s. One of the interesting things about Graycliff is their garden was originally designed by the celebrated landscape architect Ellen Biddle Shipman, and right now they are currently undergoing efforts to restore that original garden design, and they're also, thanks to some really generous support from New York State, building a visitor center there as well. It is also another great Frank Lloyd Wright restoration project here in Buffalo.
Martin House and Graycliff both have a whole string of honors and designations. Can you name some of them for us?
Graycliff is a New York State landmark, and it's also listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Martin House is designated a National Historic Landmark, which is the highest designation that the U.S. offers historic sites. Interestingly, I think it's also officially designated a New York State Historic Site, and it's the first 20th century architectural representation among the state's 36 official historic sites. Honestly, the Martin House restoration has won so many awards. It would be hard to name them all. You know, we've won awards for the restoration from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. We've won awards from the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, and the Great Batch Pavilion, our new building, actually won a Daniel B. Niederlander Award from our Buffalo History Museum, which I think is interesting. It would bore your audience if I listed all the awards, but needless to say, it is a celebration of not just history, but also of the sort of restoration crafts that it takes to take care of a building like this. It's been great to see those things awarded because, you know, it's one thing to design a building, but then folks had to actually build this building 120 years ago, and now today we have to continue to care for the building, and so those preservation trades and crafts are so critical to everything we do every day.
How many visitors do they get, both of them, a year?
Last year, 2022, Graycliff had about 16,000 visitors, which includes tours and the other types of programming that they do. At the Martin House in 2022, we had over 30,000 visitors, which again includes our formal tour program as well as, you know, the other summer camp, and we do all kinds of other programming as well. So we had just over 30,000 visitors in 2022.
But I think you can probably expect a lot more this year because people are out, they're mobile, they want to get out, they want to get around, they want a vacation. So I would imagine you're looking at a bigger influx this year, right?
We're really excited to welcome people, and now that the Canadian border is a little bit more open, that we love our Canadian neighbors, and we love it when they come to visit us too. So we expect now that it's a little bit easier to travel between the two countries again, that we'll hopefully get some more visitors as well.
There is an outdoor market, which I found fascinating because you really make use of the property held annually at Graycliff. Can you describe that, and is the timing of the market a good time to go visit both homes?
Yes, it's an excellent time. The gardens in both homes are really in full bloom over the summer. The market at Graycliff, which is expanding this summer to 9 Thursday evenings, so it'll run July 20th to September 14th, and that is some of the most beautiful weather along Lake Erie, and it's a really excellent opportunity to have sort of more casual interaction with the historic site. Of course, you can do tours, but you can just be a little bit more casual. There's vendors, there's food, there's music, there's activities, and then you can still take a tour. And guided tours of both spaces, especially if you're a first-time visitor, we really recommend. There's just the stories, and we've only scratched the surface here today, you know, the stories that you get, the understanding of the architecture of the people who built these homes. It's really rich and really worth doing. If you can do both houses on one day, you really get a sense of who Frank Lloyd Wright was as a designer and how he interacted with his family, who really did become one of his major patrons. And there's always volunteers on site on both houses to answer any other questions that you have as well.
In addition to all the tours and events offered for adults throughout the year, you also have programming for students, don't you? Can you tell us about those programs?
Yeah, sure. We love welcoming that sort of next generation of designers to our space and hopefully inspiring them. We have a lot of different programs for learners of all ages. One of the ones we really love is called our Junior Docent Program, and this is an educational opportunity that allows kids to learn about the Martin House and then, in their own words, give a tour to parents, teachers, and administrators. So it's multi-tiered. It often starts with a tour. We do multiple sessions at their school, And then they actually get a reception where their friends and family are invited here to the Martin House to watch them put on a tour. They put in a ton of work learning the architecture, the art, the history of the house, and their knowledge and understanding at the end of it is just incredible. For our younger learners, we do an Architecture Adventures program. It's really our signature preschool program, and we offer it free once a month all summer long. And programs really center around understanding nature, its connection to art, and almost every program consists of a learning activity. There's an art project. In the past, children have made bee houses. They learn how animals create architecture for themselves. They've made bug art. They paint nature scenes with the Martin House gardens as the subject. So it's a really incredible way to get kids interacting with the site and thinking about maybe their own role in design.
So it's an educational experience for every member of the family.
Absolutely.
In essence, yeah. Describe, too, and I found this fascinating, the travel experiences curated by Martin House.
Yeah, so in addition to what you can do here in Buffalo, we also wanted folks to be able to understand that wider context that Frank Lloyd Wright is working in. So we offer 1 or 2 educational travel trips every year, and these trips explore architecture that is centered on Frank Lloyd Wright and his contemporaries, and also take into consideration wherever we're going, that sort of larger geographic region, its influence on the local culture, which would have influenced Frank Lloyd Wright. We eat local food. We seek out interesting art and architecture. We try to stay in really unique hotels if possible. So these trips really allow participants to learn more about the long and colorful career of Frank Lloyd Wright, while also creating an experience through the lens of art and architecture of that city itself. We've taken folks to Phoenix, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York City, Charleston, and more. Coming up in about a month, we'll be in Florida, and then I think we'll have a second travel trip this fall. So if folks are interested in that, they can always check out our website and see what's coming up. But it's a great way to get out into other spaces and see what Frank Lloyd Wright was designing for other communities.
Listen, this has been magnificent. How do people find out more? What's your website?
It is martinhouse.org, so martinhouse.org, and there's so much great information on there about where to shop, how to visit, even just down to the individual. We get a lot of questions about the individual planting scheme. Even every plant in the garden is listed there, as well as there are some great virtual tours that could get people excited and wanting to learn more. And then we always encourage everyone to come out and visit us. You can find information about Graycliff on our website, or you can go to their site.
Well, this has been magnificent. Very, very, very astute understanding of Frank Lloyd Wright and the ability to communicate it exquisitely. So we really appreciate you. We appreciate your expertise, your time. Thank you very, very much. And congratulations again on becoming a new executive director.
Thanks, and I hope to see you and your listeners here on site very, very soon.
That's this week's podcast. Your Valuable Home comes to you every week on the new Pod City Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, and all other popular podcast directories.
If you want us to share your home improvement project or horror story, email me at kevin@yourvaluablehome.net. That's kevin@yourvaluablehome.net. And don't forget to tell your friends and family about Your Valuable Home, the weekly podcast that's all about building wealth in residential real estate and hiring the right contractor to do the right job at the right price.